"Don't touch my machine," the tech billionaire screamed at the homeless black man, not knowing this stranger was about to save his $8.3 million satellite and show him a truth that would change everything he thought he knew about worth. Sparks flew from the orbital Genesis satellite as it lay dying in the empty warehouse area. Tech boss Cameron Sterling frantically worked his phone, calling every engineer he knew. Nobody could help. The amazing satellite, designed to change how the world communicates, was destroying itself with each passing minute. "Sir, your quantum drive is breaking down in the main system," said the worn-down man, walking up with careful, respectful steps. "I can fix it." Cameron's finger moved toward security's number. How could this homeless person possibly understand technology so secret that even NASA didn't know it existed? What kind of genius was standing before him in old clothes and untied shoes? And why was he living on the streets? In the next 90 seconds, everything Cameron believed about intelligence, judgment, and human value would fall apart completely. Where are you listening from today? Drop a comment and subscribe to Untold Stories for moments of amazing truth that will change how you see potential in unexpected places. Dr. Elijah Washington hadn't always slept on cardboard. 4 years ago, he was the lead scientist whose breakthrough discoveries powered the next generation of satellite technology and saved countless lives through advanced early warning systems. Now he moved through the world as an invisible man, dismissed by the same tech bosses who rushed past without recognizing the creator of their success. This morning started like every other. Elijah woke before sunrise in his carefully hidden spot behind the old power station near Innovation Row. He folded his old tarp with military care, a habit from his research days when being precise meant the survival of entire space missions. His daily routine was sacred: wash at the 24-hour gas station, organize his few things, then head to the public library the moment it opened. Knowledge remained his connection to a world that had violently rejected him. Elijah had been watching the special orbital Genesis satellites for months. These satellites sometimes arrived at the nearby testing place via special transport. He recognized their quantum signals. He should, considering he'd created the basic research that made them possible. MIT doctorate in quantum physics, lead researcher at 3 different space companies, owner of 12 patents that made billions for companies that no longer admitted his contributions. The cruel irony wasn't lost on Elijah that he could calculate complex quantum equations in his head, but couldn't convince a hiring manager to look past his current situation. Too qualified, they said when they bothered with interviews. Not a good fit, they whispered when his credentials couldn't be denied. The real reasons hung unspoken in conference rooms and phone calls. A black man with no permanent address. A job gap after false accusations destroyed his career. The whispered rumors about being difficult to work with that followed him like toxic smoke. Elijah kept his dignity through it all. He taught homeless teenagers mathematics at the shelter 4 evenings a week. He read thrown-away scientific magazines retrieved from corporate recycling bins. He kept his brilliant mind sharp despite a system designed to dull its edge. This morning, Elijah noticed something terribly wrong with the satellite before the transport even reached the warehouse. The quantum field changes were all wrong. A clear sign that total failure was coming. The electromagnetic patterns matched exactly what his original research had predicted would happen under specific stress conditions. His warnings about this weakness had been written in classified reports 4 years ago, but his recommendations were dismissed by bosses eager to rush products to market. Now one of those same bosses was about to watch his multi-million-dollar satellite destroy itself because they ignored the homeless genius who'd designed its foundation. Elijah walked up carefully. He'd learned the hard way that his help wasn't always welcome, especially when his appearance triggered security responses faster than his expertise triggered respect. His worn jacket and messy beard typically prompted 911 calls before his scientific insights prompted gratitude. He saw the familiar look in Cameron Sterling's eyes, not recognition of Elijah as a person, but labeling of Elijah as a possible threat. The billionaire's hand moved automatically toward his phone, preparing to call security. What Cameron couldn't possibly know was that Elijah had been scheduled to speak at the same quantum computing conference, where Cameron was a keynote speaker 6 years ago. Before Elijah's world fell apart over accusations later proven completely false. But not before his reputation was permanently damaged. The tech industry had a long memory for scandal, but conveniently short memory for vindication. Elijah studied the cascade failure pattern spreading through the satellite's quantum matrix. The electromagnetic signature told him exactly which parts were dying and in what order. He could stabilize it with basic equipment and knowledge that apparently hadn't reached Cameron's current engineering team. Something pushed him forward, despite knowing the probable response. Maybe it was professional pride that survived even homelessness. Maybe it was the rare opportunity to prove his worth to someone who mattered. Or maybe Elijah Washington, despite everything society had done to break him, remained basically someone who solved problems when he saw them. Cameron Sterling had just finished another useless call to his emergency engineering team. His frustration was visible as spectators gathered around the smoking satellite, whispering and pointing at the failed technology. The billionaire's reputation hung in the balance as much as his investment. Elijah took a measured breath and stepped forward. "Sir, I understand what's failing in your system," he said, keeping his voice steady and professional. "Your quantum drive is experiencing cascade failure in the main stabilization matrix. The electromagnetic resonance is creating destructive interference patterns that will consume the entire system within about 47 minutes. The words that came next would trigger a sequence of events that would expose not just flaws in cutting-edge technology, but basic flaws in how society judges human potential. Cameron Sterling hadn't realized his day could get worse. The orbital Genesis satellite, only 5 ever made, had chosen the most public possible moment to experience terrible failure. 2 hours before his presentation to potential government contractors, 3 miles from the nearest authorized repair place, with 0 cell service in this industrial dead zone. "Step away from the equipment, please," Cameron said without making eye contact. His voice carried the practiced authority of someone used to immediate obedience. The growing crowd of onlookers had phones out, recording the spectacle of the smoking satellite. Cameron Sterling, tech visionary and founder of Nexus Aerospace, stranded beside his $8.3 million monument to failure. Social media gold within minutes. "Sir, I genuinely can help," Elijah continued, keeping respectful distance while electromagnetics energy continued to tear the satellite apart from within. "This specific model has a documented weakness in the quantum entanglement stabilization array. The cascade failure pattern I'm observing matches exactly what happens when the tertiary containment field develops resonance oscillations." "How would you possibly know anything about this satellite?" Cameron snapped, finally looking directly at Elijah. His gaze registered the worn clothing, the weathered appearance, the reusable shopping bag containing Elijah's worldly possessions. His expression shifted from frustration to dismissive irritation in seconds. Elijah met his stare with calm dignity. "Because I helped develop the theoretical framework the stabilization system is built upon. The quantum entanglement principles governing your satellite's operation." Laughter erupted from Cameron's throat, sharp, disbelieving, cutting. Several onlookers joined in nervously, uncertain what they were witnessing but drawn to the drama. "Right. And I'm secretly teaching space science at community college on weekends." Cameron turned his back, focusing on his phone again, dismissing Elijah like an annoying interruption. "Look, I appreciate whatever this is, but this satellite contains classified government technology. Most engineers with security clearance can't service it, so I'm sure you understand why. The cascade failure is spreading through the tertiary field generators, which is causing the blue-white electromagnetic discharge you can see getting stronger around the central array," Elijah interrupted quietly. "If the pattern continues unchanged, you'll experience complete quantum matrix collapse in about 41 minutes. The resulting energy release will render the satellite completely unsalvageable." Cameron froze. The electromagnetic discharge was indeed blue-white, and getting stronger exactly as this stranger described. The satellite's diagnostic system had given him a 43-minute warning before total system failure, but that information wasn't visible to anyone standing outside the equipment. "How did you?" he began, then stopped himself, suspicion replacing surprise. "Did someone put you up to this? Is this some kind of corporate spying?" A sleek black van pulled up. 3 security personnel emerged, private contractors from the nearby aerospace complex, responding to Cameron's earlier emergency call. "Is there a problem, Mr. Sterling?" asked the team leader, automatically assessing Elijah as the most likely source of trouble. "This individual was just leaving," Cameron replied coldly. "He seems to think he knows something about classified satellite technology." "I know the orbital genesis uses a modified version of the Washington-Chen quantum stabilization protocol," Elijah said quickly, urgency creeping into his measured tone. "I know it has a critical weakness documented in classified report QE 4471, filed 4 years ago. I know that internal memo Delta 779 specifically warns against the configuration you're currently using." Cameron's face showed a flash of recognition at the memo number. That was classified documentation that never left secure facilities. How could this homeless man possibly know those reference codes? "Mr. Sterling, we should secure the area," interrupted the security leader. "Your satellite contains sensitive intellectual property." Elijah stood his ground with quiet dignity. "You have about 38 minutes before that quantum matrix suffers irreversible cascade failure. The nearest authorized service facility can't help you. They don't have the specialized knowledge or equipment for this specific emergency. And moving this satellite in its current state will only speed up the destruction." Cameron hesitated, visibly torn between dismissing Elijah entirely and confronting the growing realization that this stranger somehow possessed insider knowledge that shouldn't exist. "Sir," the second security guard addressed Elijah firmly, "I'm going to need you to move along now." "Wait." Cameron raised a hand, studying Elijah with new intensity. "You mentioned specific classified documents. How do you know about Washington-Chen protocol?" "Because I am Washington," Elijah replied simply. "Dr. Elijah Washington. I developed the original quantum stabilization framework your satellite depends on." For a brief moment, something like recognition flickered across Cameron's face. The name triggered a vague memory, something from academic conferences or research papers, but he couldn't place it precisely. The first security guard moved closer to Elijah. "Sir, final warning." Cameron checked the diagnostic readout on his tablet. The cascade failure was speeding up. 36 minutes until complete system loss. The manufacturer's emergency team was at least 3 hours away. His critical government presentation was becoming impossible to rescue. "What exactly would you need to fix it?" Cameron asked, ignoring the surprised looks from his security team. "Access to the primary quantum chamber, basic diagnostic equipment, and about 25 minutes of uninterrupted work." Elijah responded immediately. "Most of what I need should be available in your emergency repair kit." Cameron weighed his impossible options. The growing crowd of spectators, the irreplaceable satellite, the career-defining presentation, the stranger who somehow knew things he absolutely shouldn't know. "Mr. Sterling, we strongly recommend against," the security leader began. "Check his identification first," Cameron interrupted. "Full background check." The third guard escorted Elijah aside, while his partner spoke quietly into his radio. Elijah cooperated with calm professionalism, producing his shelter identification card, the only official documentation he possessed. When the guard returned, his expression was troubling. No permanent address, no employment records for 4 years, some kind of incident at his previous position. The shelter confirms he stays there sometimes. Cameron's face hardened. He'd been willing to take a desperate gamble, but this information reinforced every prejudice and assumption he'd been fighting. "I'm sorry for the confusion," he told Elijah, sounding anything but sorry. "My security team will handle this situation." Elijah watched as Cameron dismissed him from consideration, already turning away to focus on other options. But what happened in the next 60 seconds would prove exactly how dangerous it could be to judge capability by circumstances. Cameron's phone rang with what he hoped was salvation. His expression collapsed as he listened to the update from his engineering team. 4 hours? That's completely unacceptable. The system is giving me less than 35 minutes before permanent damage, He paced in tight circles, the crowd's whispers growing louder around him. No, I understand it's classified technology. That's precisely why I contracted with your company. There has to be someone closer. Elijah stood quietly, watching the billionaire's options disappear in real time. The security guards kept their positions between them, but their stance had relaxed slightly as the true nature of the crisis became clear. Useless. Cameron ended the call with visible frustration. He stared at his tablet's diagnostic display, then at the intensifying electromagnetic discharge from the failing satellite. The security team exchanged glances. "Sir," the team leader said carefully, "perhaps we should evacuate the area if there's risk of total failure." "There won't be an explosion," Elijah said calmly. "The energy release will be contained within the quantum field matrix. The real concern is complete loss of the quantum entanglement arrays, which will render the satellite permanently broken. Total loss, about $8.3 million, plus 4 years of development work." All three men turned to stare at Elijah. The precise dollar amount wasn't public information. "How do you know the exact development cost?" Cameron demanded. "Because I consulted on the original feasibility study," Elijah replied evenly. "The quantum stabilization framework requires specific rare earth elements that drive manufacturing expenses. I helped calculate those cost projections." Cameron's skepticism fought visibly with his growing desperation. That information was buried in classified budget reports that weren't accessible outside the company. The second security guard leaned closer to Cameron. "Sir, we could contact law enforcement if this person is bothering you." Cameron waved him off, studying Elijah with renewed intensity. "You said your name is Dr. Elijah Washington." "Yes. And you claim you developed the stabilization protocol my satellite uses." "I didn't just develop it, I hold the basic patents that your entire quantum entanglement system is licensed from. Patent numbers QS779 Delta and QS773 Delta, registered 4 years ago." Cameron's eyes widened. Those weren't patent numbers anyone outside the aerospace industry would know, and certainly not someone who supposedly lived on the streets. He moved closer, lowering his voice. "If you're who you claim to be, why are you?" He gestured vaguely at Elijah's circumstances, unwilling to say the word. "Homeless," Elijah supplied without embarrassment. "It's a complex story involving false accusations, industry blacklisting, and systematic barriers that are designed to keep people down once they fall. But right now, what matters is that your satellite has about 28 minutes before total system failure, and I can prevent that." Cameron checked his tablet again. The cascade failure was speeding up beyond the system's original projections. His government presentation was slipping away with each passing minute, along with potential contracts worth hundreds of millions. "What exactly would you do?" Cameron asked, his voice betraying the first hint of serious consideration. "I need access to the primary quantum chamber to recalibrate the entanglement field oscillation patterns," Elijah explained with the precision of someone who designed the system. "The cascade failure can be stopped by implementing a controlled destabilization sequence that will reset the matrix to stable parameters." Cameron's disbelief remained evident. "That's impossible. My engineers say this type of failure requires complete system replacement and months of recalibration." "Your engineers are too cautious because they don't fully understand the theoretical principles involved," Elijah said. "The quantum stabilization system is stronger than they realize, but it requires precise intervention at the quantum field level." One of the security guards who had been listening intently suddenly spoke up. "Sir, I think I recognize this man. He volunteers at the downtown community center, teaches physics to at-risk youth. The program coordinator says he's some kind of genius." Elijah nodded slightly in acknowledgement. "Science education doesn't require a permanent address. And he really knows this stuff." Cameron asked the guard. "The community center director has a PhD in education. She says Dr. Washington understands physics better than most university professors." Cameron paced for a moment, weighing options that were rapidly diminishing. The electromagnetic discharge hadn't stopped. The diagnostic system now showed 26 minutes until terrible failure. "Show me," he finally said to Elijah, "not the actual repair work. Just explain to me exactly what's happening inside that satellite and what you would do to fix it." Elijah approached the satellite carefully, his movements professional and confident. Without touching the equipment, he began a detailed technical explanation that would either prove his expertise or expose him as an elaborate fraud. The quantum entanglement drive uses paired particle arrays to maintain stable communication channels across vast distances, Elijah began, pointing to specific components visible through the satellite's transparent housing. Your system employs a three-tier stabilization matrix: primary, secondary, and tertiary containment fields, each operating at different quantum frequency ranges. Cameron's expertise was sufficient to recognize that Elijah spoke with genuine authority about highly classified systems. The cascade failure began when fluctuations in the primary containment field created resonance oscillations that are now spreading through the secondary and tertiary systems. The blue-white discharge you can observe is actually quantum field energy bleeding through compromised containment barriers. Cameron stared in growing amazement as Elijah continued describing exact technical specifications, component locations, and operational parameters that only someone intimately familiar with the system would know. Standard repair protocol would require complete disassembly, because engineers assume worst-case contamination of the quantum matrix. But with this specific failure pattern, we can implement a controlled reset sequence that will restore stable operation without replacement of any major components. How would you even access the quantum chamber? Cameron asked, his skepticism giving way to fascination. Elijah smiled slightly for the first time. Your emergency repair kit should contain quantum field diagnostic equipment and basic recalibration tools. The access protocol is embedded in the satellite's emergency systems. You just need to know the correct activation sequence. Cameron checked his watch. 23 minutes until total failure. His government presentation was in 90 minutes. The manufacturer's team was still hours away. If you damage my satellite, Cameron began. It's already damaged, Elijah interrupted gently, and becoming more damaged every minute we spend talking. The question is whether you'll allow me to save it before it's completely destroyed. Cameron took a deep breath and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Let's see what you can do. The satellite's access panels opened with a soft hiss, revealing technology that represented the bleeding edge of human achievement. The gathered crowd murmured appreciatively at the rare glimpse inside one of the world's most advanced aerospace machines. Elijah approached with methodical precision, his eyes scanning the quantum chamber with the familiarity of someone who had helped design its principles. I'll need your emergency diagnostic kit, he told Cameron, all business now that he'd been given permission to proceed. Cameron retrieved a sleek titanium case from the transport vehicle and placed it beside the satellite. Elijah opened it efficiently, assessing the contents with practiced expertise. This will work for most of what we need. The quantum field recalibration tools are exactly what I specified in my original protocol documentation. One of the security guards looked confused. You specified what's in our emergency kit? I helped design the emergency repair protocols when I consulted on this project 4 years ago, Elijah explained while selecting precise instruments from the kit, before my career ended under circumstances beyond my control. Cameron watched with undisguised fascination as this homeless man transformed before his eyes into what was clearly a master-level engineer. His movements were economical, confident, betraying years of professional experience with the most sensitive technology. The quantum entanglement chambers should be visible once I remove this access panel, Elijah explained, selecting a specialized tool. The cascade failure will be apparent from the field disruption patterns around the primary stabilization array. Cameron found himself nodding along. Despite his lingering skepticism, he was impressed by Elijah's calm expertise and obvious familiarity with systems that puzzled even Cameron's own engineers. How long did you say you worked on this technology? Cameron asked. 5 years developing the theoretical framework, 2 years consulting on practical applications, Elijah replied without looking up from his work. Before the incident that ended my involvement with classified projects. What kind of incident? Cameron pressed. Elijah paused briefly. A satellite failure was blamed on my team. Investigation later proved it was caused by management overriding our safety protocols to meet an arbitrary deadline, but by then the damage to my reputation was irreversible. His hands returned to their precise work. These access locks are designed to prevent unauthorized tampering. May I use your phone's flashlight? Cameron complied, holding his device to provide illumination, while Elijah carefully removed a complex panel assembly. A distinct humming became audible as the chamber was exposed. There it is, Elijah said, pointing to what appeared to be a shimmering distortion in the air around a central component. The cascade failure is creating visible quantum field distortion around the primary stabilization matrix, exactly where I predicted this weakness would show up. That tiny distortion is causing $8 million worth of damage, Cameron asked, incredulous. Quantum systems operate on principles that don't scale intuitively, Elijah replied, reaching deeper into the chamber with delicate precision. Microscopic disruptions at the quantum level can cascade into macroscopic system failures very rapidly. A sharp voice cut through their conversation. What the hell is going on here? A woman in an expensive business suit pushed through the crowd, flanked by 2 additional security personnel. Her corporate identification badge marked her as Dr. Jennifer Hayes, Senior Vice President of Technology for Nexus Aerospace. Cameron, we received reports of unauthorized access to classified equipment. Our security protocols strictly prohibit. She stopped mid-sentence, staring at Elijah working inside the quantum chamber. Jennifer, thank you for coming, but we have the situation under control, Cameron said. This gentleman is helping with an emergency repair. Dr. Hayes' gaze swept dismissively over Elijah's appearance. Sir, our security protocol absolutely prohibits unauthorized individuals from accessing proprietary technology, especially. She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was unmistakable. He knows what he's doing, Cameron insisted, though his voice carried less conviction than before. With all due respect, Cameron, this satellite contains technology worth millions in intellectual property. We cannot allow just anyone to. I'm not just anyone, Elijah said quietly, continuing his work without looking up. And we have about 17 minutes before irreversible cascade failure. Dr. Hayes stepped closer, her corporate authority evident. Sir, I need you to step away from that equipment immediately. The returning security team had grown to 5 people, all watching Elijah with professional suspicion. The crowd had swelled further, with someone from a tech blog now filming everything. Jennifer, please, Cameron began, but she cut him off. Cameron, we've had multiple industrial spying attempts this year alone. How do we know this isn't another one? How do we know he hasn't been waiting for an opportunity exactly like this? The seed of doubt that had never fully disappeared from Cameron's mind began growing again. The crowd recording everything, his reputation, his company's security protocols, all suddenly at risk. Perhaps we should wait for our authorized engineering team, Cameron said, his confidence wavering visibly. Elijah looked up from the quantum chamber, his expression remaining perfectly composed despite the renewed dismissal. In 14 minutes, waiting will no longer be an option. Sir, Dr. Hayes addressed Elijah directly, please step away from the equipment now, or we'll be forced to have security remove you. Elijah slowly straightened, setting down his tools with deliberate care. Mr. Sterling, I need you to understand something crucial. He pointed to a specific component deep in the satellite's core. That is the quantum field generator. In about 12 minutes, the cascade failure will reach a critical threshold. When that happens, you won't just lose this satellite, you'll lose 4 years of development work and any hope of meeting your government contract deadlines. Cameron hesitated, visibly torn between his desperate need for a solution and the corporate pressure surrounding him. Dr. Hayes pressed her advantage. Cameron, we've already contacted federal authorities. This man has no credentials, no authorization, and no legitimate reason to access classified technology. For all we know, he could be deliberately sabotaging the system. I've helped identify the exact problem and the solution, Elijah said quietly. Perhaps that will assist your engineering team when they arrive in 3 hours. He began to step back from the satellite, maintaining his dignity despite the public humiliation. The diagnostic system chimed an alert. Warning: 9 minutes to catastrophic system failure. With security closing in and his reputation on the line, Elijah made one final attempt that would either vindicate him completely or confirm everyone's worst assumptions. "Mr. Sterling, I'll make you a proposition. Make one call to verify my identity. Just one. Contact Dr. Sarah Chen at Quantum Dynamics Corporation. Tell her Elijah Washington is here." The tension in the warehouse was suffocating as Cameron considered Elijah's request. Dr. Hayes and her security team stood ready to remove Elijah from the scene. The crowd had grown silent, sensing the high-stakes drama unfolding before them. "Dr. Sarah Chen at Quantum Dynamics?" Cameron asked, surprise evident in his voice. Elijah nodded once. "Tell her I'm here. She'll confirm everything I've told you." Cameron hesitated only briefly before retrieving his phone. The fact that he had direct access to Quantum Dynamics' chief scientist spoke volumes about his position in the aerospace industry. "This is Cameron Sterling," he said when the call connected. "I apologize for the unexpected call, Dr. Chen, but I have an unusual situation." He glanced at Elijah. "There's someone here who claims to know you, says his name is Elijah Washington." The change in Cameron's expression was immediate and dramatic. His eyes widened as he listened to the response. The security team exchanged uncertain glances as seconds stretched into a full minute of Cameron listening intently, occasionally looking at Elijah with completely new eyes. "Yes, he's right here," Cameron finally said. "Would you mind if I put you on speaker?" He activated the phone's speaker and held it between himself and Elijah. "Elijah? Elijah Washington, is that really you?" The voice that came through the phone was clear, professional, and filled with disbelief. "Hello, Sarah," Elijah replied, a genuine smile softening his weathered features. "It's been a while. 4 years, 7 months, and about 18 days, Dr. Chen responded immediately. "You disappeared completely after the aerospace dynamics incident. We looked everywhere for you." "It's a long story," Elijah said simply. "I'm sure it is. Cameron, do you understand who you're speaking with?" Elijah Washington is the most brilliant quantum physicist I've ever worked with. His stabilization protocols revolutionized our entire industry. Every major satellite system launched in the past 4 years uses his innovations. Cameron's face showed his growing amazement. "He claims he can repair my orbital Genesis satellite, says there's a cascade failure in the quantum matrix. If Elijah says he can repair it, then he can repair it," Dr. Chen replied without hesitation. "In fact, he probably designed the basic systems your satellite depends on." Quantum Dynamics licensed several of his patents for our latest generation spacecraft. Dr. Hayes, the corporate VP, shifted uncomfortably as she realized the magnitude of her error. The security team, who had been prepared to forcibly remove Elijah, now stood uncertainly. "The thing is, Dr. Chen," Cameron continued, his voice lowered, "he appears to be experiencing homelessness." Elijah supplied the word Cameron struggled to say. "I've been living on the streets for 4 years, Sarah." Stunned silence came from the phone. That's impossible. You had offers from every major aerospace company after you were cleared in the aerospace dynamics investigation. I personally sent you 3 different opportunities." "Like I said, it's complicated," Elijah replied. "But right now, Mr. Anisagat Sterling's satellite has about 7 minutes before total system failure. With your endorsement, perhaps he'll allow me to complete the repair." The diagnostic system chimed again, as if responding to his words. "Warning, 7 minutes to catastrophic failure." "Cameron," Dr. Chen's voice was now deadly serious. "Let Elijah repair your satellite. Not only is he capable, he's probably the single most qualified person on the planet to do it. I would trust him with technology worth billions, let alone a single satellite." Cameron looked at Elijah with completely transformed perception. "I don't understand. If you're who she says you are, how did you end up in these circumstances?" Elijah held his gaze steadily. "False accusations, corporate politics, and a system that's designed to exclude people who fall through the cracks. Once you're homeless with no address, no phone, no credit score, try rebuilding a career in classified aerospace technology. But we can discuss social inequality after we save your satellite," he added practically. Cameron nodded, properly chastened. "Dr. Hayes, stand down. Dr. Chen, thank you for the confirmation." "Wait," Dr. Chen said quickly. "Elijah, when this is over, call me immediately. I mean it. We have positions waiting for you. We've always had positions waiting for you." "I'll consider it," Elijah replied, non-committally. Goodbye, Sarah. Cameron ended the call and turned to Elijah with new respect. I owe you a significant apology. You owe me the opportunity to finish what I started, Elijah corrected him, already moving back toward the satellite, and about 6 minutes of uninterrupted concentration. Dr. Hayes approached Cameron, her earlier authority replaced by obvious embarrassment. Cameron, I had no idea. Our security protocols aren't designed to recognize genius in unexpected circumstances, Elijah suggested gently, returning to his precise work within the quantum chamber. That's rather the point of this entire situation, isn't it? As Elijah resumed his repair work, the crowd's atmosphere had completely transformed. What began as voyeuristic curiosity about a billionaire's mechanical problems had evolved into something approaching reverence for witnessing extraordinary expertise in action. How exactly does this stabilization process work? Cameron asked, genuinely curious now as he watched Elijah's hands never wavered. He continued working with methodical precision, implementing the stabilization sequence he had designed years ago for exactly this type of emergency. Quantum field alignment, now. Primary matrix stabilization, engaged. Secondary containment, restored. The electromagnetic discharge around the satellite's core began to diminish visibly. The angry blue-white energy that had been tearing the system apart slowly faded to a stable, controlled glow. Tertiary systems coming online, Elijah announced calmly. Cascade failure sequence, terminated. He made one final adjustment, then carefully stepped back from the quantum chamber. Try the startup sequence now, he instructed Cameron. Cameron approached the satellite's control interface with obvious hesitation. Are you certain? If there's still a problem, we'll know immediately. If not... Elijah shrugged with quiet confidence. Your satellite will be fully operational. Cameron activated the startup sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the orbital genesis hummed to life with the distinctive sound of perfectly calibrated quantum systems. No sparks, no electromagnetic discharge, just the smooth operation of cutting-edge technology functioning exactly as designed. The diagnostic display flickered, then showed, all systems operational, quantum matrix stable, performance at 100% capacity. A spontaneous cheer erupted from the crowd. Several people were recording the moment, capturing the instant when impossible became reality. Cameron stared at the diagnostic readout in complete disbelief. That's impossible, he whispered. My engineers said this repair couldn't be done outside a specialized facility. Your engineers lack understanding of the basic principles involved, Elijah replied, wiping his hands on a cloth from the repair kit. They overcomplicate solutions because they don't fully grasp the theoretical framework underlying the technology. Cameron looked at Elijah with pure amazement. How long will this repair hold? The recalibrated quantum matrix should maintain stability indefinitely under normal operating conditions, Elijah explained. I've basically restored the satellite to factory specifications. You'll want to schedule preventive maintenance to address the underlying weakness, but that's a long-term optimization issue, not an emergency. Cameron extended his hand. Dr. Washington, I owe you more than I can possibly express. You've saved my company millions of dollars and years of development work. Elijah accepted the handshake, his expression remaining composed. You're welcome, Mr. Sterling. But Cameron wasn't finished. His natural curiosity as an entrepreneur and engineer had been thoroughly awakened. I want to understand more about your situation and your work. Would you be willing to continue this conversation somewhere more appropriate? Elijah considered the invitation carefully. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not sure that's... Please, Cameron interrupted. At minimum, I owe you proper compensation for saving my satellite. And frankly, after what Dr. Chen said about your expertise, I have questions that could benefit my entire company. Dr. Hayes, who had been observing the miraculous repair with growing embarrassment, approached cautiously. Mr. Sterling, your government presentation is in 45 minutes. We should leave soon if you're going to make it on schedule. Cameron's expression lit up with sudden inspiration. Come to the presentation with me, he suggested to Elijah. These government officials are evaluating our quantum communication systems for national defense applications. Your insights would be invaluable. Elijah shook his head. I'm hardly dressed for a government presentation. Cameron checked his watch, then looked at Elijah's worn clothing. We have time to address that. Dr. Hayes, call ahead to Executive Tailoring on Innovation Row. Tell them we need their best available in Dr. Washington's size, ready in 20 minutes. Dr. Hayes looked surprised but nodded and stepped away to make the call. That's not necessary, Elijah protested. Consider it part of your consulting fee, Cameron insisted. Plus, I want to see those government officials' faces when I tell them who really solved the impossible quantum stabilization problem. For the first time, Elijah allowed himself a genuine smile. That might be worth witnessing. But I still don't understand how someone with your capabilities ended up in these circumstances, Cameron said, his voice growing serious. What happened after Aerospace Dynamics? Elijah's expression clouded. It's not a pleasant story. I'd like to hear it anyway, Cameron said, but first I have a proposition for you. Another test? Elijah asked. I thought I just passed a rather significant one. You did, Cameron acknowledged. But I'm not just interested in your repair skills. I want to understand if your insights can transform our entire approach to quantum technology. He paused, studying Elijah's face. Join me for this government presentation. Listen to our proposal for the National Defense Quantum Communication Network. If you can identify improvements to our design, as I suspect you can, I'll offer you a position as Chief Technology Officer on the spot. Elijah studied Cameron's expression, searching for any hint of insincerity. And if I decline your offer? Then I'll still compensate you fairly for saving my satellite and my presentation, Cameron replied. But something tells me you might be interested in what we're proposing to build. 25 minutes later, the change was remarkable. In the private fitting room of Executive Tailoring, Elijah emerged looking like a completely different person. The perfectly fitted navy suit emphasized his still impressive physique despite years of hardship. His beard had been professionally groomed, his appearance transformed from homeless wanderer to distinguished scientist. Cameron nodded approvingly. Now you look like the brilliant physicist you've always been. Elijah adjusted his tie, his movements carrying new confidence. Appearances matter in your world. Unfortunately, yes, Cameron admitted. But in 30 minutes, you'll have the opportunity to demonstrate that substance matters more than surface impressions. The ride to the government facility was brief but significant. Elijah gazed out the window of Cameron's luxury vehicle, watching neighborhoods he usually navigated on foot flash past from this new perspective. I've taken the liberty of having my assistant research your background more thoroughly, Cameron said, consulting his tablet. MIT summa cum laude. Doctorate in Theoretical Physics by age 24. Principal investigator on 3 major government contracts. Holder of 17 patents in quantum field applications. He looked up. Then nothing. You vanished from the industry completely 4 years ago. Elijah nodded but offered no immediate explanation. The Aerospace Dynamics incident, Cameron continued. I found the initial reports blaming your team for the satellite failure, but I also found the follow-up investigation that completely cleared you and proved management had ignored your safety recommendations. By then, the damage was irreversible, Elijah said quietly. Initial accusations make headlines. Vindication gets buried on page 12. But surely other companies would have hired you. Dr. Chen seemed eager to offer you positions. Elijah smiled sadly. When you're accused of costing a company millions, doors close quickly across the industry. Add systematic racism, whispered rumors about being difficult to work with, and a few strategic character assassinations, and suddenly no one returns your calls. That explains career damage, but not 4 years of homelessness, Cameron pressed gently. Legal fees consumed my savings fighting the false accusations. Depression and anxiety made job searching nearly impossible. Once you lose your apartment because you can't pay rent, once you don't have an address or phone number, the system is designed to keep you down. Elijah turned from the window to face Cameron directly. Do you know how difficult it is to get hired when you're homeless, when your clothes are worn, and you can't afford professional grooming? The same credentials that impressed you earlier become suspect when you're living on the streets. Cameron had the grace to look deeply uncomfortable. I'm beginning to understand the magnitude of what you've overcome. They arrived at the imposing government complex with 15 minutes to spare. As they walked through the security checkpoint, officials who normally treated visitors with bureaucratic indifference showed notable respect for Cameron's status and obvious curiosity about his distinguished companion. "Cameron, this is Dr. Patricia Morrison, Deputy Director of Defense Communications," Cameron said as an authoritative woman in her 50s approached them. "Dr. Morrison, I'd like you to meet Dr. Elijah Washington, one of the world's foremost experts in quantum field applications." Recognition flickered in Dr. Morrison's eyes. "The Dr. Washington who developed the quantum entanglement protocols for satellite communications? Your work has been foundational to our national defense systems." Elijah nodded politely. "That was several years ago. I understand you're evaluating quantum communication networks for expanded military applications." "We are indeed. Your timing is fortunate. We're hoping to identify the most capable contractors for a project that could transform how our armed forces communicate globally." As they entered the presentation room, Cameron leaned close to Elijah. "These officials don't know about the satellite repair this morning. They don't know about your current circumstances. To them, you're exactly what you've always been, a brilliant scientist whose work protects our national security." The presentation room held 20 government officials, military officers, and technical advisors. Cameron began his prepared remarks about Nexus Aerospace's quantum communication proposal, but Elijah found himself studying the technical diagrams projected on the screens with growing concern. The system Cameron's team had designed was ambitious and expensive, but it contained basic flaws that would compromise both performance and security. Worse, those flaws were exactly the types of weaknesses that hostile nations could exploit to intercept classified communications. As Cameron concluded his presentation and opened the floor for questions, Elijah realized he faced a choice that would define not just his future, but potentially his country's security. "Are there any questions about our proposed quantum communication network?" Cameron asked the assembled officials. Dr. Morrison raised her hand. "The security protocols you've outlined are impressive, but I'm concerned about potential weaknesses in the quantum entanglement maintenance systems. How would your network resist targeted electronic warfare attacks?" Cameron began to respond with his prepared talking points, but Elijah quietly cleared his throat. "If I may address that question," Elijah said, rising from his seat. "The current design does contain some weaknesses that could be exploited by sophisticated adversaries." The room fell silent. Cameron looked surprised but nodded for Elijah to continue. "The quantum entanglement array as currently configured would be susceptible to cascade disruption attacks, similar to what we witnessed this morning with the satellite prototype. An enemy could potentially collapse the entire communication network by targeting specific nodes in the quantum matrix." General Patricia Hayes, a decorated military communications expert, leaned forward with interest. "What specific weaknesses are you identifying, Dr. Washington?" Elijah moved to the presentation screen, his commanding presence immediately capturing everyone's attention. "May I?" Cameron handed him the presentation remote. Elijah advanced to the technical schematic slides and began pointing to specific components. "Here, here, and here," he indicated precise locations on the network diagram. "These quantum relay stations lack redundant stabilization systems. If an adversary could induce oscillation failures at these 3 points simultaneously, they could create a domino effect that would compromise classified communications across the entire military network." The room erupted in whispered conversations as technical advisors frantically took notes. Dr. Morrison exchanged concerned glances with her colleagues. "Are you suggesting our network would be vulnerable to foreign intelligence services?" asked Colonel James Rodriguez, the military's lead communications security expert. "I'm saying that without proper safeguards, yes," Elijah replied directly. "But these weaknesses are entirely preventable with relatively simple modifications to the quantum stabilization protocols." He turned to face Cameron, whose expression had shifted from surprise to fascination. "Your team has built an impressive foundation, but you're missing critical security redundancies that I developed specifically to prevent the types of attacks that nation-state adversaries would likely attempt." General Hayes spoke up. "Dr. Washington, Could you specify what modifications would be necessary to secure this network against the weaknesses you've identified? For the next 20 minutes, Elijah delivered an impromptu technical presentation that left the government officials speechless. He identified not just security flaws, but opportunities to increase network performance by 40% while reducing operational costs by millions of dollars annually. When he finished, the room remained silent for several seconds before Dr. Morrison began clapping. The applause spread throughout the room as military officers and technical experts recognized they had witnessed extraordinary expertise in action. Dr. Washington, Dr. Morrison said as the applause subsided, your insights have transformed our understanding of this project. Would you be willing to serve as the lead technical consultant on this quantum communication initiative? Elijah looked at Cameron, who was staring at him with undisguised amazement and obvious pride. I think that's a conversation Dr. Washington should have with his new employer first, Cameron said with a grin. Dr. Washington, I believe I mentioned something about a chief technology officer position? 3 months later, the transformation was complete. Dr. Elijah Washington stood in his corner office on the 32nd floor of Nexus Aerospace headquarters, reviewing quantum field calculations on a wall-sized digital display. The view of the city below included the industrial district where his life had changed forever. His assistant knocked and entered. Dr. Washington, your 2 o'clock appointment is here. Send him in, please. Cameron Sterling entered, carrying a folder of documents and wearing an expression of barely contained excitement. Elijah, I have news that's going to change everything, Cameron said, settling into the chair across from Elijah's desk. The Pentagon just approved our quantum defense communication proposal. Full funding, complete implementation, 5-year contract worth $2.8 billion. Elijah nodded with satisfaction, but not surprise. The security modifications we implemented solved their weakness concerns. Your security modifications, Cameron corrected. This success belongs to you, but that's not why I'm here. He opened the folder and spread several documents across Elijah's desk. These are patent applications for the innovations you've developed since joining Nexus. 17 new patents in quantum field applications, including the security protocols that just won us the defense contract. Elijah examined the documents, noting his name listed as primary inventor on each application. The intellectual property agreements are quite generous. You'll earn royalties on every implementation of these technologies for the next 20 years, Cameron explained. Conservative estimates suggest $47 million in patent income alone, not including your salary and equity position. Elijah set down the papers and looked directly at Cameron. Money wasn't why I accepted your offer. I know. That's why I wanted to discuss the other project you proposed. Cameron pulled out additional documents. The Washington Institute for Quantum Innovation, full funding approved, $50 million initial investment, with additional funding as needed. Elijah's expression grew serious. You're certain about this? Completely. Your concept is brilliant. Identify overlooked scientific talent, provide resources and support regardless of circumstances, then nurture that potential into breakthrough innovations. We'll be revolutionizing how the industry discovers and develops genius. Elijah stood and walked to his office window, gazing down at the city. How many brilliant minds are out there right now, dismissed because of circumstances beyond their control? How many world-changing discoveries are we losing to prejudice and systematic barriers? That's exactly what the Institute will address. Cameron joined him at the window. Your lived experience combined with our resources and industry connections will create opportunities for people the system has failed. When do we begin? Elijah asked. The facility is ready. The first class of fellows starts next month. 20 individuals we've identified through the screening process you developed. Homeless scientists, underemployed researchers, overlooked inventors. All brilliant, all overlooked, all about to get the support they need to change the world. Elijah smiled, the expression carrying deep satisfaction. Dr. Morrison called yesterday. She wants to discuss expanding the quantum communication network internationally. Apparently, several allied nations are interested in the security improvements we developed. This is just the beginning, Cameron said. Your innovations are going to transform global communications, protect national security, and create thousands of jobs. But more importantly, the Institute is going to prove that genius exists everywhere. We just need to be wise enough to recognize it. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Elijah's assistant entered with a young woman in her 20s, professionally dressed but with an unmistakable nervousness about her posture. Dr. Washington, this is Dr. Maria Santos, the first Washington Institute Fellow. She's the former biochemist we discussed. Elijah approached Dr. Santos with a warm smile. Dr. Santos, welcome. I understand you've developed some innovative approaches to cancer treatment research. Thank you, Dr. Washington. I've been working on them while I was staying at the shelter. Your assistant said the Institute might provide resources to continue my research. Dr. Santos, let me tell you something, Elijah said gently. Circumstances don't determine capability. The fact that you've continued advancing scientific research while facing homelessness tells me everything I need to know about your potential. He gestured toward the seating area in his office. Please, sit down. I want to hear about your work, and then I want to show you the laboratory facilities we've prepared for your research. As Dr. Santos began describing her biochemical innovations, Cameron quietly excused himself, leaving Elijah to focus on what had become his most important work, transforming overlooked potential into world-changing reality. The transformation rippled far beyond a single company or individual. The Washington Institute's first fellows had already begun producing breakthrough innovations that caught the attention of the global scientific community. Dr. Santos's cancer treatment protocols were being fast-tracked through clinical trials. A former software engineer who had been homeless for 2 years developed cybersecurity systems that the Department of Homeland Security adopted immediately. A physicist who had been living in his car created energy storage solutions that 3 major corporations were competing to license. International media coverage of the Institute attracted attention from universities, governments, and corporations worldwide. Similar programs launched in 12 countries, all based on Elijah's model of identifying and nurturing overlooked scientific talent. The quantum communication network had been implemented across all branches of the military and was being expanded to protect diplomatic communications globally. The security protocols Elijah developed became the international standard for classified quantum communications. But the true measure of success wasn't found in contracts or patents or international recognition. It was found in the transformed lives of scientists who had been written off by a system that confused circumstances with capability. In business schools around the world, the Washington Sterling case study became required curriculum for courses on innovation management, organizational psychology, and social responsibility. Students learned that the most dangerous assumption in business was thinking they could judge potential by appearances. Ladies and gentlemen, our keynote speaker this evening needs no introduction to anyone familiar with quantum physics or defense communications technology. Dr. Elijah Washington, Chief Technology Officer of Nexus Aerospace and founder of the Washington Institute for Quantum Innovation. The applause was thunderous as Elijah approached the podium at the National Science Foundation's annual conference. 500 of the world's most distinguished scientists and engineers filled the auditorium, all eager to hear from the man whose story had become legendary in scientific circles. Thank you, Elijah began as the applause subsided. I want to tell you about a morning that changed my understanding of human potential. He paused, looking out over the audience of successful professionals who hung on his every word. 4.5 years ago, I was homeless. Not by choice, not as some philosophical experiment, but because a series of circumstances had destroyed my career and left me with nowhere to turn. I spent 3 years living on the streets, invisible to the same scientific community that now honors my contributions. The auditorium was silent. Every person focused intently on his words. I want you to imagine something. Imagine that the next breakthrough your field desperately needs, the innovation that could save lives, transform industries, or solve global challenges, exists right now in the mind of someone society has taught you to ignore. Imagine that person is sitting on a park bench, not because they lack intelligence or motivation, but because they lack opportunity. Because the system confused their temporary circumstances with their permanent potential. He gestured toward the audience. Everyone in this room represents extraordinary privilege. You have advanced degrees, prestigious positions, comfortable homes, and professional networks that amplify your voices. You are the beneficiaries of systems designed to reward people like you. But talent, genius, and innovative thinking don't care about your address, your appearance, or your access to professional networks. They exist wherever human potential exists, which is everywhere. The audience was completely engaged. Understanding, they were hearing something that would change how they viewed their responsibilities as successful professionals. The Washington Institute isn't charity. It's not social work. It's not feel-good corporate responsibility. It's strategic identification and development of overlooked intellectual resources. It's a recognition that we cannot afford to waste human potential when we face challenges that require every brilliant mind we can find. Since the Institute launched, our fellows have developed innovations worth over $400 million in licensing agreements. They've created solutions to problems that established research teams couldn't solve. They've proven that genius doesn't require privilege. It just requires opportunity. Elijah paused, allowing his words to resonate through the auditorium. I challenge every person in this room to expand your definition of where breakthrough thinking comes from. The next time you see someone whose circumstances suggest they couldn't possibly contribute to your field, ask yourself, what assumptions am I making? What potential am I overlooking? What innovations am I missing because I'm judging capability by appearance? The measure of our scientific community isn't found in the success of those who were born with every advantage. It's found in our ability to recognize and nurture brilliance wherever it exists, regardless of the circumstances that temporarily obscure it. The standing ovation lasted for 4 minutes. But more important than applause was what happened in the months that followed. 37 new talent identification programs launched at major universities. Corporations began implementing bias-free hiring practices for technical positions, and government agencies developed new approaches to finding innovative solutions from unexpected sources. 2 years after that keynote speech, Elijah's impact continued expanding in ways he never anticipated. The quantum communication protocols he developed were protecting classified communications for 23 nations. The Washington Institute model had been implemented in 56 countries, identifying and nurturing over 3,000 overlooked scientists and inventors. But perhaps more importantly, Elijah's story had become a catalyst for examining systematic biases in how society identifies and develops human potential. Cameron Sterling, now CEO of the fastest-growing aerospace company in the world, regularly spoke about what he called the Washington Principle. The recognition that extraordinary capability often exists in circumstances that make it invisible to traditional identification methods. The morning I met Elijah changed everything I believed about judgment and potential, Cameron told a gathering of Fortune 500 executives. I almost missed working with the most brilliant scientist I've ever encountered because I confused temporary circumstances with permanent capability. Every business leader in this room has probably made the same mistake. How many opportunities have we missed? How many innovations have we overlooked? How many problems have remained unsolved because we were looking for solutions in the wrong places? The corporate world began implementing what became known as Washington Protocols, systematic approaches to identifying talent and innovative thinking that transcended traditional metrics like education, employment history, or professional appearance. But Elijah himself remained focused on the work that had become his passion, transforming overlooked potential into world-changing reality. The Institute continued expanding, its fellows producing breakthrough innovations at rates that astonished the scientific community. The tragedy was never that I was homeless, Elijah reflected during a private conversation with Cameron. The tragedy was that society wasted my potential for 4 years and continues to waste countless others because we've confused circumstance with capability. How many cures for diseases remain undiscovered because brilliant medical researchers can't get interviews? How many solutions to climate change exist in minds that nobody takes seriously? How many innovations that could transform entire industries are dismissed because they come from unexpected sources? Cameron nodded thoughtfully. The Institute is proving those solutions exist. We just needed to know where to look and how to nurture them. That's the real lesson of that morning when you found me near your broken satellite, Elijah concluded. It's not about my individual story. It's about recognizing that human potential doesn't announce itself with credentials and professional attire. It exists wherever intelligence, creativity, and determination exist, which is everywhere, if you're wise enough to see it. 5 years after a homeless man approached a broken satellite in an abandoned warehouse, the ripple effects of that encounter continued transforming how the world identified and developed human potential. The quantum communication networks Elijah designed protected global security. The Washington Institute had identified over 5,000 overlooked scientists whose innovations generated billions in economic value while solving problems that had puzzled established research teams for decades. But the true legacy wasn't measured in patents or profits. It was measured in transformed understanding of where brilliance comes from and how easily it can be overlooked by systems designed to reward appearance over substance. In universities around the world, students learned about the Washington Principle. Never judge potential by circumstances, because extraordinary capability often exists exactly where you least expect to find it. Corporate leaders implemented new approaches to talent identification that looked beyond traditional credentials to find innovative thinking in unexpected places. Government agencies developed programs specifically designed to identify overlooked expertise that could contribute to national priorities. The scientific community established new standards for recognizing and nurturing genius that transcended the biases and systematic barriers that had historically excluded brilliant minds from contributing their potential. Cameron Sterling, reflecting on the morning that changed his life, often told audiences, "I learned that the most dangerous assumption any leader can make is thinking they can judge someone's potential by their current circumstances." Elijah Washington taught me that genius doesn't require privilege. It just requires someone wise enough to recognize it and generous enough to nurture it. But perhaps the most important legacy was found in the thousands of individuals whose potential had been dismissed by society until someone finally recognized their value. Scientists, inventors, researchers, and innovators who had been overlooked, underestimated, or ignored until someone realized that extraordinary capability often exists in the most unexpected circumstances. The lesson resonated far beyond the scientific community. In a world facing complex challenges that require innovative solutions, we cannot afford to waste human potential based on superficial judgments. The next breakthrough idea, the next life-saving innovation, the next world-changing discovery might come from someone society has taught us to ignore. The real transformation wasn't just about one homeless man who became a billionaire scientist. It was about fundamentally changing how humanity identifies, values, and develops the potential that exists in every corner of society. Potential that once recognized and nurtured can literally change the world. If this story of hidden potential and second chances resonated with you, subscribe to Untold Stories for more accounts of extraordinary individuals whose circumstances nearly prevented the world from benefiting from their genius. Share your thoughts in the comments about times when you've encountered unexpected brilliance, or when your own potential was overlooked because of circumstances beyond your control. Remember, the next world-changing innovation might come from someone you'd never expect. The question isn't whether that potential exists. It's whether you're wise enough to recognize it when you encounter it. Like this video if you believe everyone deserves the opportunity to contribute their unique gifts to the world. Subscribe if you want to see more stories of how recognizing overlooked potential can transform not just individual lives, but entire industries and communities.